Thank you very much, Jarosław, for having explained this link between contemplation and leadership very well. What I want to do is to also stress this link between leadership and contemplation, and a bit make a bridge how we practice this in our courses here at MRI. I think key is this difference between apophatic, we could also say kenotic prayer, where we want to empty our mind. Think also of so many negative thoughts which are always within us and can negatively program us. So I think to empty our mind and in a sense go beyond our words is first the key, so to reach silence, silence as a revelation. Okay. Now, after reaching this silence, I think we have also, some of you here have this experience that now when you listen, now in this case with the itinerary of 150 Psalms, or the mystical Gospel of St. John, all of a sudden we can experience much more deeply the meaning of what St. John wants telling us, this also mystical gaze on Jesus. And what can indeed appear shocking, I also want to share that with a Jesuit friend, the former Bishop of Shanghai, had this deep experience. Before he was deported, he spent 27 years in jail, Father Jin Yuxian. He shared with me, before he was deported, he felt very much at peace, because he said, I don't need churches. Of course, we like churches as a place of worship, but the Trinity is in me. Therefore, he said he was deported 4 times, different places in China. But yet his experience made him very reassured. And of course, I would say it's maybe the strongest investment we made in the Rich Institute, and I'm so glad we do that together, is this effort for self-management. I don't know any people else rather than Hong Kong and Macau. People say, oh Father, I don't have time for contemplation. Therefore, the hope is that this crisis of the pandemic may be a wake-up call. Because before you say you should, never be. But now, all of a sudden you are in quarantine, locked in a hotel. What do you do? Endlessly computer games? Maybe not. So, therefore, we both pin hopes that this first is really a research project. It's not just vague feelings, it's maybe something of the most demanding, also in terms of research, but also that we want to convey it as self-management. Because before we can guide others, if we have a whole horde of monkeys in ourselves, we cannot command. There's no way we can be inspiring leaders. So, therefore, I want now to open this sort of debate, Q&A. So, no matter if, for my side, of course, it's also what I do since several years in my training with leaders. And my choice was also, in Switzerland we have a strong tradition of Christian Zen. But my choice was not Zen, because also as one of the Jesuits in Japan observed, I think rightly, is the religion of the oppressors. Think about that. See? So who can afford really to embark in the demanding Zen, not the watered down Zen, but the demanding Zen. So my choice was contemplation. So if you are not brain damaged, you can really practice contemplation. It's very easy to practice. And it's also true to observe we have lost this tradition. Buddhism has much more kept alive this meditation as something valuable. We lost this tradition. So therefore, we have made this considerable effort to involve many people, first of all as research, but also as a practical experience, then leading to true compassion and commitment in the world. So please feel free to maybe challenge us with your thoughts, inspiration, sharing your insights, and no matter related to Raguin or now this whole project of contemplation and leadership.
Thank you very much for this lecture that enlightened me a little more about Father Yves Raguin. Yves Raguin became my friend. We invited him many years to the University of Santo Tomás to teach ways of contemplation, East and West. And the first time that he went there, the first time that he was there, I took him to the room of the fathers, Dominican, no? He said, Fausto, you are a Dominican. I am a Jesuit. Never mind. We are brothers in the priesthood. That impressed me very much, no? But once I went to Taipei, and I had a very long interview with him that I published. No? And in that interview, I want to share with you two thoughts. First one is, one, contemplative and active. How come all of us are contemplative and active? But usually even us Dominicans that are supposed to be contemplative, it seems that we are more active than contemplative. Okay? And then the Jesuits and the Dominicans have something in common on this. What is that? What is the, in a sense, the motto of the Jesuits? As I read, contemplativus in actione. Contemplative in action. What is the motto of the Dominicans? Contemplata aliis tradere. That is to contemplate and to give to others the gifts of contemplation. And I asked him about how do you connect both. So he told me, the aim of contemplation is to help people know that they can be very active and at the same time very contemplative. The inner self, inner peace, is the one giving the peace. And the more quiet he is, the more he will be able to face the world. I think that is beautiful and helpful. Then the second is, I told him, how come you are now 68, but you look at most 50? And then he told me, I will tell you the secret. The secret. A peaceful attitude in his life. A peaceful attitude. More concretely, the things outside me do not bother me. I seldom react to others. Thus, one can have peace and friends. I think that is very important. I have lost some friends because not keeping quiet. So those are the things I wanted to share, and I'm very happy. Thank you very much.
At last, we have somebody who witnessed personally, who has experience of Father Yves Raguin. Yes, Father Greg.
Thank you, Jarek. Towards the end of your talk, you mentioned about learning to pray and learning to love. Now, one of the problems nowadays, people are afraid. I remember there's a book called Why Am I Afraid to Love? I think more important, why am I afraid to be loved? This is one of the contemporary problems. People are afraid to let go, to let love in, to let God in, because God is love. Now, does Father Raguin in his writing or in your research how to help contemporary people face this problem, how to let God in this interiority, because there are obstacles, there are hurdles to be overcome, problems. How do you help a person who is afraid to be loved? Maybe in some of his writing.
I think what he managed to do in his writings, but not only writings, but also accompaniment of so many people in his experiences in Taiwan, Vietnam, and other places of South Asia, was that he was able to combine the theoretical reflection and what he learned from Buddhism with very concrete and practical existential problems of people, because he was very faithful in dedicating enough time to accompanying and listening to the problem of people. He was not just a scholar or sinologist sitting at the desk and writing the books, right? These books, what we have, the 4 volumes, Ways of Contemplation, East and West. Actually, this is a combination, 4 volumes of the lectures he gave in Taipei at the invitation of the Bishop of Taipei to introduce this synthesis between East and West. So on the one hand, he was very rigorous in terms of providing the framework, because I also believe that what we need to remember, just the practice of meditation, just the facing a problem without how to face them is not a solution. Many people struggle nowadays with depression and in the context of lockdown, but they don't know the way of the way out from this situation, right? Because what is important in spiritual practice is how we face the truth about ourselves. One of our difficulties is, and I think he learned this greatly from Buddhism, is that we live in the illusion of self. And unless we really go deep, penetrate our delusions or illusions of ourselves, and also name our sufferings, what is the source of our suffering, then we may have difficulty to solve those problems. So on the one hand, there is a theoretical combination of framework of reflection, systematic reflection, drawing also on the spiritual sources of other religions. He was not afraid of it. Okay? We have so many Christians who are afraid of crossing this border and being afraid of betraying Christianity, or when you practice meditation, oh, it's dangerous because you are betraying your faith and so on. No, he was not afraid of it, and he was encouraging people, he was accompanying them. So on the other hand, at the same time, very courageous in facing the problems and difficulty. And he said that during the lectures, for example, in Vietnam, in South Asia, he had he had this kind of attitude of humility in learning. He learned a great deal of knowledge, not from books only, let's say, but through interaction with so many Buddhist friends and Christians. He learned to dialogue with them. He wanted to understand how you understand Buddha's teaching, how you understand yourself as a believer of Buddhism. And from that knowledge, he started to reflect about himself. So it inspired him to reformulate his own way of speaking about Christ, sharing the faith, not just bookish knowledge, what learned during the classes, whatever, theology, but learned experience of faith. And this way, I think, he was helping ordinary people. Not, of course, he was not some kind of psychotherapies, whatever. Today, a combination of meditation on mindful stress reduction meditation, which is very promoted in the States. You know, it was started by John Kabat-Zinn, very famous scholar who started to apply meditation to psychotherapy, and it has been quite successful, but it is one level of application of meditation and not necessarily will satisfy everybody, because there is still deeper level. Apart from psychological, anthropological, still deeper level, this depth of God about which he speaks. And I think he managed to answer the deepest desires and expectations of people, not to help them to solve the ordinary and temporary problems, but rather helping them to orient themselves to the ultimate source of their happiness. And then, gradually, when they practice that in their daily life, they were able to solve also other problems. This is how I view, how I see his contribution to dealing with problems and difficulties of on the daily basis with so many people. So we have to bear in mind that he was also a very practical person, in a sense that, as I understand from his writing, you know him better. I've never met him, but as I understand him from the sharings, from different reflections, he was also a very practical man and was accompanying people very well, very successfully.
When Father Fausto said that Dominicans and Jesuits have something in common, I suppose you were going to say that we don't pray enough. Okay. Now my question is, our faith is Trinitarian, and our experience of God is Trinitarian also. That makes our experience very rich. I didn't see much, although it's there when he talked about the three gates or whatever, the Trinitarian reading of Raguin, of Buddhism, of contemplation, could you perceive that? Did he use these experiences as a way to understand or express what he was saying, or no? The experience of the Father, the experience of the Son, the experience of the Spirit, which is close to Buddhism, I imagine.
I don't remember him to produce a very systematic reflection on this Trinitarian dimension. But what I see from the writings, like The Way of Contemplation, or there is also a book, a text on L'Esprit sur le Monde, or something like that, dealing about the Holy Spirit also, that I would say that through all his writings, you cannot find out a very systematic Trinitarian vision. This definitely I cannot say for what I have seen in his writing, but definitely on many occasions in many papers and books he mentions that. For example, there is a text about the missionary. What is the role of contemporary missionary nowadays? And in this text he speaks about this, I think this collaboration, this Trinitarian vision, the presence of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And many other writings, you have either speaking about Son, or as I mentioned, the Christocentrism was the essence of his prayer, okay? So he was never betraying this fundamental belief that Christ should be always the center. But he warned that, what does it mean that Christ is the center of the prayer? I did not quote that, but he says, Christocentrism does not mean that, or somehow we find ourselves between me and God, there is Christ who is a sort of mediator. And he concludes, if we believe in that way of in such a Christocentrism, then we are far away from truth. I would refer to the last quote I used in a very extraordinary way, somehow diverging a little bit from the official, so to speak, cataphatic approach of the Western Christianity, looking at this experience, personal experience, as not simply imitatio Christi, Christ as a model or sort of, I need to follow him, but really at the depth, allowing Christ to reveal himself, and how Christ can reveal himself in the life of a believer who practices faithfully, through the Spirit, of course. Christ cannot reveal himself without action of the Holy Spirit, because this is the essence of the Trinity. God, Son, and the Father collaborate in the process, in the history of salvation. So, and then again, another pneumatological dimension. We have a lot of this pneumatological dimension in his writings. Again, not explicitly, but present in different places. When, for example, he speaks about the presence of the Holy Spirit, or the seed of the Word, according to Justin, right? The seeds of the Word present in all cultures. So, and the Holy Spirit ongoingly, in continuous process of working and being present in all cultures and religions. He deeply believed, without this belief, he wouldn't be able to dialogue with people of Asia, with other religions, if he had not this kind of conviction that the Holy Spirit is already at work before we even start to dialogue with Buddhists, Taoists, and Confucians, right? So I would say it is there. There is Trinitarian dimension more or less explicitly present. He is not betraying that. He's not sort of, again, he's far away from any kind of pantheistic, heresy, whatever. So he cannot be accused of betraying the orthodoxy, so to speak, Christian orthodoxy. This is how I would answer that question.
I know Father Raguin because of his work of inculturation, also Christology, and I will say, following the opinion of Janik Kriveler of Jamaica, some writings about him, that he went beyond reaching, because he did not remain only in the one in 76 in France. And I have here from his diary in 79, he wrote something that has puzzled me. It's very beautiful statement here. In 79, he wrote in his spiritual diary, "My internal being was enlightened, and an intimate touch of soberness was entering into me. It was like a tenderness that was invading and attracting me, but without uprooting me from my madness. On the contrary, it was like the constant realization within me of a new incarnation." For me, it's a mystic experience. Was he enlightened?
Yes, thank you for this question. Again, for this, we have various notions for what we call enlightenment. I wanted to mention about this, but we did not have time. Enlightenment, illumination, realization, transformation, and then using also Japanese terms, kensho, satori, and so on and so on. So different traditions use different, metanoia, right conversion, different traditions use different terms. And he explicitly in his diary, La vie et plénitude, the life and fullness, that spiritual diary, he explicitly refers to Japanese terms. He says that I experienced kensho and I experienced satori. What is kensho and satori? These are sometimes interchangeably used terms, but there is a difference. Kensho, kensho is kensho in Chinese, kensho is to see the true nature, benxing, the original nature of ourselves. So this is common to Buddhists, and also he considered that it happened in his life through this inspiration. But Satori is Jue Wu, what in Chinese we call Jue Wu, is deeper realization. This is called enlightenment. This is like feeling being one, united with the whole reality. It's not just seeing only my benxing nature. It's something more, being really united with the whole reality. And he had this experience. So he had kensho, and then lower, so to a middle stage, a lower degree of realization, and then higher degree satori, which is the enlightenment. So from his sharing, of course, you see, in the Buddhist tradition, what is important, we don't have such a tradition in the Western Christianity. In Buddhist tradition, the master needs to approve your realization. You cannot say, I got enlightened, right? Because this is fake. Only the master has the right to say, to recognize you got enlightened. So he went to Japan to meet that master, of course not for recognition, but to have a conversation with him. But it influenced him so deeply that on the plane 3 days later, he got it. And he did not look for recognition when begged or whatever, please recognize. No, he simply shares in this spiritual diary, I have this experience of unity with Christ, this kind of being reborn and so on. He simply shares, and it looks like with higher degree of probability that it was genuine. I would say it was really a genuine experience.
From the readings, several readings in French, one of the insights that struck me very deeply is when he talks about Buddhism and Taoism in the sense of the need of emptiness and detachment. And even from him I learned Taoism is deeper even than Buddhism. Both are in the sense of detachment and emptiness, but Taoism is in a some more like a search in the depth of our own being, which then we can open to the sense of God in our own creation. So I enjoyed this insight. It seems to me very important, this question of detachment and emptiness of self, but I would say the superficial self and not deep self. The detachment helps me to go deeper for my true self. Why I say this at the same time? Because nowadays we are in a great difficulties to create that deep sense of self, which implies detachment and emptiness. Because we are full of masks in our own inner self. And at the same time, if I can recall, if you allow me, even some conversations with you as a professor, saying, Kierkegaard, a man talked about the existential anguish and was put aside. And nowadays, now as a priest and accompany many people, we step by step we go to the point of touching the deep anguish of the people, which even priests and sisters, they are and masters, they are afraid to touch this anguish. For saying, if emptiness and detachment is a way we need to go deep in our true self, and even allowing calmly admit that openness to God. If nowadays we continually frightened of silence, to run or walk in detachment and emptiness of ourselves, which the philosopher Kierkegaard is telling and was put aside, even as a way to show the existence of God through our deep anguish. We are nowadays in a great trouble. And this pandemic has challenged the system, because the people is really hunger for something deep of ourselves who brings us to happiness. But if you have no capacity of creating emptiness and detachment in a very Buddhist way and Taoist way, and even, I would say, in Christian way, we have to have men as our own mankind.
May I answer to this question, because it touches a very important point, which is also the question Father Gregory asked. When we do the type of contemplation we offer, it's important, and I think it's normal, that many human feelings arise. Say it can be a strong anger or it can be anxiety. But I think the point is we don't pay attention to that. It's just there, and it can become very strong. That's very normal. But in this tradition, we let that pass like a cloud, let that pass. It's not we run after like we run after a dog, but we recognize that, and we believe that the passive purification, to let that pass by, is more deeper than what we have as what we call an active purification. Like we have active purification with confession and so on, but I personally truly believe if we are now stuck in a quarantine and if we experience this anxiety, is a chance. But also to believe that this will be purified not by our active efforts, but by a faithful sticking to a contemplative practice. And I think that's also the kind of risk of our religious life. They have become empty. See, it's, if I may, a very simple observation. You have quoted also the Karl Rahner, also a friend of our dear Fausto. He was celebrated, and many talks were, and his very old mother also said, but you did not pray enough. And he said, forget all the other talks, that was the only one, she was really right. So it's also a sense, and I think it's very rich what you also shared about these different practices, but if we reach this contemplative death, it is something which will purify us and overcome also deep inner wounds we have, and that's actually what we want to share.
Yes, following on this intuition of Father Luis, yes, in Le Profondeur de Dieu, the masterpiece, the depth of God, he starts from this diagnosis. Our epoch of the times in which we live is afraid of silence, is afraid of emptiness. Paraphrasing, of course. It means that in order to reach the depth of God and the depth of ourselves, we need to go through kenosis. That's why he connects the emptiness about you mentioned. Whatever we consider Taoist or Buddhist emptiness, of course they are not the same, but eventually kenotic experience or emptiness leads us to what? To fight our false idols we created for ourselves. This is the main goal. Not to make us suffer or to destroy us. The problem with emptiness or shunyata, emptiness mainly, understanding in the West is that we consider it in a negative terms, but it does not have negative connotation in Asia. It has very positive dimension. Emptiness would be better to translate as Shunyata, the concept of shunyata, one of my professors in Rome called it that way, transparency or purity. Better to call it like that, purity. Why? I quoted that contemplation, act of absolute purity. Because in this emptiness, I stay naked as I am created in front of God. There are, as Father Louis mentioned, no more masks that we put on whatever experiences we create in our lives. No hiding behind masks, right? Whatever it is, it can be also religious one, whatever. Many of them. So this purity, transparency, I'm as I am in front of God, and then I will know God as I am known by Him, as it is promised by in the Gospels, right? We will know God as we are known. This beautiful statement. This is emptiness, actually. Eventually, God leads us through this process of purification from all the idols we are attached to, and this liberation, this is a real liberation. Jesus speaks about the liberation from sin, but of course it means ultimately, first of all, the liberation from all our attachments to idols we have in our life. And eventually this creates kind of serenity, peace, submission, intimacy with God, and our relationship with other people changes dramatically, because we do not consider others as enemy, as a threat, but enter into friendly relationship with others, because I see in others what I see in myself. If I don't see it, if I don't have this transparent view in myself, I will not have it. I will not look at others that way. Okay, so this is interconnected in my view. And Father Raguin was pushing or proposing this kind of interreligious process of transformation, drawing on Taoist, Buddhism, and Christianity in order to propose people of different walks of life, not only Christians but also non-Christians, how to really convey and share the same religious experience among different denominations. Because we can close ourselves in our circle and to use that language, Christian language, but are we really trustworthy and communicating something important to people of other beliefs? This is the purpose of interreligious dialogue, right? To walk together toward the truth. This is, I believe, deeply Yves again was implementing. Thank you.
Any burning question you would like to ask? Otherwise, you will certainly then join me after that to celebrate the baby and also this publication of the PhD of Father Jarosław Duraj. So it's called the Role of Metaxy in Political Philosophy of Eric Voegelin. We are very happy. It's always a great achievement. As you know, Father Jarosław is a perfectionist, so we have this. So please, with you, then also we have, you can divide the research of Father Thierry Ménard about the tombstones of the Shanghai Jesuits. And it's also a way I want to thank you and the Macau Foundation, because this year we have a focus on this new economic paradigm. We have 1,200 economists have worked on the paradigm, and so it was just today it came out our number 7, and and after 5 years of fight with the censorship, you allow me also to mention this book which came out in Beijing. It's really 5 years, and this was already destroyed. So this is on international business ethics, and also particularly like to thank Macau Foundation also supporting this research. So really, thank you so much also for your thoughtful insights, sharing that, and join me also celebrating and thanking Father Jarosław for this wonderful talk. Thank you very much.